What things can I focus on to help release from the mind and let go of my limiting beliefs and old stories and release my attachments to outcomes and the tendency to try and control the 3D reality?
Mm. Have we not answered that question? Mm. In other words, we will say it again, we will reiterate in a different way. In other words, mm, when you are embracing your subconscious or your limiting beliefs, and you are saying, that is a limiting belief, and I choose not to believe that anymore, or I choose to think differently, or I choose to refocus my thoughts, or I choose a new pattern, or you say, I take control of my beliefs and my actions and my thoughts, and you decide that that is how you are going to show up from now on. And you make that decision, and then lo and behold, you come across maybe a year or two or 6 months or however long, and sometimes it rears its ugly head again, and you say, didn't I already deal with that? Why am I having to do this again? Why is this happening again? I thought I made a different decision. Why is my limiting belief showing up again and again? It is because of embracing it. In other words, if you call it limiting, and if you call it, I'm attached to something being a certain way, it is always because of the fear of that mm, mm, you are not in control, and you are not enough, and that you are not all that is, and that you are mm, mm, less significant than you want to be. And so when you feel like you are attached to a certain way of being, what that does, of course, is set you up for just that. In other words, you get to look at all the ways that you are not enough. Because if it does not happen exactly the way that you want, then you feel disappointed. And then you allow your subconscious to say, see, I told you so. You're not enough. You're not able to do it right. You're not able to show up the way you want. What is your problem? And that is, again, the bug syndrome. In other words, the shadow part of you. And if you embrace it and say, oh, well, here it is again. Isn't this interesting? And I'm noticing that it doesn't affect me as much as it used to. So that is progress. In other words, if you have something that happens that you feel like you've let go of, or that you are thinking that you've made a new decision, and then all of a sudden something happens that, as you say, triggers an emotional response, or triggers an energy, or triggers some kind of belief again, and you go back to that original decision that you made, perhaps not even from this lifetime. And what you can say to yourself is, be more of the observer and say, isn't that interesting? My shadow self has come in, showed up again. So I choose to embrace you, shadow self. I choose to embrace this belief and know that this was something for me to play with and to not be so serious with. And I choose to notice that I am not allowing it to affect me as much as it used to. Therefore, it is not the same thing. It is in a different place altogether. It feels familiar, it feels similar, but it is in a different place because time is a spiral and you are spiraling. And some of you think you spiral backwards. And that is not the case. You are always spiraling. And when you spiral, oftentimes it feels similar if you, quote, get into a rut. In other words, it feels like, here I am again in this same experience, or why am I so attached to this outcome? Or I just can't get it right. All of those feelings and all of those spirals, if you stop and observe it and look at it from the point of view that it is different. I felt that when I was 10. Now I'm 35. I felt that way when I was 6. Now I'm 65. What is the difference between then and now? And as I've said, past, present, and future happens at all times. It is a matter of what are you going to focus on at that moment? What do you bring forth? What do you bring forth to focus on and to allow and embrace that part of you that perhaps shows up again? Life is a game, dear ones. You have come here to play. And that has been our message all along, that so many of you feel so serious around wanting to make a difference and wanting to show up and wanting to be all that you can be and allow all that you can allow. And it is almost squeezing the joy out of it and squeezing the play out of it. That what is it that they say? All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. Well, it also brings up those bugs a lot when you have those things happen. When you have a bump in the road, you have the GPS. All you have to do is remember. And remember that you are non-physical in essence, and that you are limitless. And the only limits that you have at this moment is what you decide is limiting to you. And we understand there is a limit to that third dimensional body, it seems. And again, there is an evolvement happening from human beings, and you will be able to communicate in a different way. Some call it telepathy. Many of you do that already. And by doing that, you can reach so many people, and the colors will be a language. So just as Dorothy found a new color, this is a new language of unity, a new language of allowing. And do not, if you find yourself going back down the spiral and feeling like you are starting all over, just know that you are not. That the spiral moves forward, whether you feel it or not. Indeed. And what we want you all to know is this: you belong. You are beacons of light. And any time that you feel the shadow come up, just know that when you shine your light, it leaves a shadow. When the sun is out, it has a shadow. That is part of it. And embrace that part of you and just say, oh, well, there it is again. Isn't that interesting? And it's not affecting me as much as it used to. And there it is. I choose to burn bright. I choose to be a beacon and to play more, dear ones. Play is extremely important. If you look at animals and children who are very present beings, they play. It is an innate exercise of bringing forth the joy of your own beingness and your chi energy and your life force. Turn your blue light up. There is much love here for you. We are complete.